got to have change, otherwise the politicians do. It's like IT, you never get an IT system that works for 5 years. We've got to keep adding and changing.
Good morning, Mayor Hicks and Mayor Tom.
Here's the milk.
Morena.
Actually, I can only just hear you.
My PC won't let me log into
No, it's better. Yeah, it's better now, actually.
I'll speak up.
Problem was mine.
Right.
Again.
As far away from the speaker as we can get. Well, welcome to this meeting. This is depending on the outcome of the elections. This is sort of the final meeting of the current team. What happens next time round? Wish us all well. We have apologies from Steve Perry and Wilma, our Chief Executive from Southland. I'll move from the chair that those apologies be accepted.
Just from the Chief Executive of Southland District 2.
Okay.
I'm happy to second those, Neville.
Thanks, Tracy. We're all in favour of that. Good.
Right.
And we welcome Mrs. Faimali
Yes,
to our meeting from NEMA.
thank you.
Thank you for coming along, showing an interest in us. So declarations of interest, are there any declarations of interest? Additionals, what you have already done related to today's meeting. If not, public forums, petitions and deputations, none of those today. Confirmation of minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 18th of May.
Happy to move those, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Happy to second them. I've been through them. They look fine to me.
Thank you, Gemma. Is there any discussion on that? Not put the motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? It was carried. Thank you. The key, no, wait a minute, confirmation of minutes, supplementary, extraordinary and urgent business, none. Are there any questions? Morning, Claire.
Hi, how are you?
Chairman's report. We decided to have this meeting because this is the current team that has been in place for the last 3 years, actually 6 years, isn't it? And operating and managing what could be said as one of the more successful and well organised emergency management groups in New Zealand. We've briefed a couple of ministers in the last few months, the old minister and the replacement minister, and I think they've been impressed, and quite rightly so. So I thank you all for your endeavours and your input and your support for the organisation that the councils in Southland have created. It's wonderful. So item 9, and agenda item 9, item 1, coordinating executive group key chair report. On behalf of Wilma Felton.
No,
Oh, sorry.
that's why I'm here.
That's what it said on the. Sorry.
Wilma,
I apologise.
not at all. But interesting if it says that there, because that's the reason for my coming today. Happy to take it as well.
So we note that report, that refers to other reports that are on the agenda, doesn't it?
Does indeed.
All right.
They were discussed by the executive at their last meeting.
Thank you. Move that we note that report. Seconded by Councillor Prince. Thank you.
Yeah, happy for that.
All those in favour? All right, thank you. So item 2 is the emergency preparedness survey, followed by our manager, Simon Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. This report was compiled by Research First, which is a contract that we employed to actually do the report for us. There was some concern in previous internal surveys that we did that we weren't reaching the breadth of ethnicities or genders that are reflective of Southland. So we had professionals come in and look at this. They had a much bigger survey pool than we'd had originally. So as you can see from the survey reports, there is 65% of Southlanders that have the perception the main hazards would be from flooding, 60% from earthquakes. The flooding, you can see there 16% are prepared in reaction to the Southland floods. And that can be quite misleading if you read that in a bit of a hurry, that it could be 16% are prepared for flooding, but it's the bar below. 26% of people are prepared for the prepared for earthquakes from the Christchurch earthquakes, Christchurch and Kaikoura earthquakes. So 82% of people understand the importance of being prepared, and 49% of Southlanders believe that they are prepared. So obviously the job for Emergency Management Southland in the upcoming years is to move that awareness from awareness to preparedness. What is pleasing though is of the 49% of people that say they're prepared, 49% of those people say that they're prepared for 11 to 14 days. The reason we ask those questions on the preparedness of how long you're willing to be prepared for is for an AFA scenario, being a time where more isolated communities will not be able to be contacted in quick order. So unlike a flooding situation, it's believed that an AFA scenario or an alpine fault rupture scenario will be one of those things where it would actually isolate a number of communities. So we were happy to ask that question, and we put that question out for others, or sorry, should I say the AFA have asked for that particular question to be included in other South Island surveys. A question did come up at KEG, and how do we compare to the rest of New Zealand? And I believe that NEMA have a study that they do on a yearly basis as well, a survey study on a yearly basis, but that hasn't been completed for this particular year at the moment. So I can't speak to that, although I believe one in, I might refer to Rochelle just to give us those figures of preparedness. As you can see, the Research First did a relatively good cover of the demographics, and you can see there that the Gore District Council has been overrepresented in the numbers, 118 responses. The reason for that is the researchers were suggesting that if we did it on a percentage basis, that Gore feelings may be just lost with the Invercargill and the Southland District side of things. Otherwise, there's a good breakdown, I believe, of age and gender throughout the report, and that's given us a pretty good report, I believe. But as I say, we've got to move that awareness of only 2% to preparedness, which is only 49% at the moment. Happy to answer any questions.
I just observed from looking at there that infrastructure failure is put down as a 20% risk, when in fact is flooding, earthquake, storm or cyclone, tsunami, snow and ice can all contribute to that. People appreciate that, you know, their infrastructure is going to be at risk from most of those things.
Yeah,
it depends on what questions were asked, I suppose.
Yeah, I can't really talk to that, but I believe they were talking about an infrastructure failure on its own rather than a cascading effect of one of the other hazards.
Okay.
For me, does a state of emergency trigger a civil defence response?
Yes.
missing in that schedule there is actually the reverse of most of it, which is the drought. We got close there last year, didn't we? What would happen if we ran short of water?
You won't speak up, we'll be.
Oh, sorry.
For the speakers.
So I guess what's not on that front page, which is flooding, earthquake and the likes, is the impact of a drought, which we came close to last year. It does trigger some sort of civil defence response, I guess. And yet it's not actually quoted there. And I wonder whether that's a bit of an underlying thing. Like I heard the NEWA scientists last time we had that, to say, well, look, your rivers are now flowing. Don't get complacent because your aquifer is still 5 years away from recovery. So if we had another drought this year, we'd be in even worse state. It didn't impact the city, but you heard stories about the Tiana Basin and places like that. Being pretty desperate. And it was more focused, I think, on stock numbers as opposed to human numbers as well.
Yeah.
So I just wonder whether in future things, whether people are thinking about that as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Headley.
Mr. Chair, there's an item further on in the agenda about hazards, and that hazard of a drought is something that we should consider when we look at that item.
I agree with you. I think we're going to have another drought this year.
I think it's a hazard that comes up regularly that is not automatically thought of when you think of the Southland region.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Just if I may, and it's not a criticism, but I'd just be interested to know NEMA's thoughts on survey of 391 people. Because these are where these statistics have come from, isn't it? A total of 391 telephone calls, because I understand that the internet stuff was put to the side. It's just a hell of a lot of work for 391 responses, and the information that's come back is great. Don't get me wrong. I just wonder how we could get the message out to more people.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't have any comment on the numbers, and I'm not actually sure when we do a national survey what sort of numbers we pull from either. I do know, though, that our national average is 2 and 5 people are prepared. So the numbers here that are showing for Southland are higher than the national average. If that's anything to give you confidence. But yeah, I can't speak to those numbers or what researchers generally do or what sort of numbers they pull from when doing these types of work.
If I may, through the chair, in our discussions with Research First, they felt that these were the numbers that would represent a good response. And I don't know the black magic that goes on with the research world, but they felt that this would give us plus or minus 5% on what the results are.
Okay. I just thought 391 people out of 100,000 was a bit low, but anyway, just my view.
Yeah, again, at the KEG meeting, we had a discussion about telephone, outbound calling, the value of the internet self-selecting being a real challenge, and a recognition that councils are moving towards self-selection, which does through an email type survey, and we'd look at how that could come to here. I think the minimum number that you need for a survey to be statistically okay is 400. 391 is probably close enough.
Is there any further discussion on that particular item?
Yeah, just on the numbers thing, I guess. I'm not the expert in this, but we've seen that we do surveys, the city does surveys about ratepayer satisfaction. We get at numbers that collectively using different mediums get up around about 800 and something. Right. I know certainly any of the national surveys always go 1,000 plus. The other margin's too big. So yeah, I don't know how you get those numbers up. Basically, it says, looking at other mediums is pretty helpful as well. You have a certain demographic that has a landline.
Yeah. I through you, Mr. Chair, I know we put an appendix on here of people that responded to our Facebook page. We felt that it was good to actually measure them differently. And the reason for that is because people that are logged into our Facebook page, you would expect to be well prepared and well understand their hazards. So we felt that could skew those numbers. Surprisingly, I found some of those numbers were actually very close to the telephone inquiry of people that aren't necessarily connected with emergency management.
Well, good. So the recommendation is that we note the emergency preparedness survey results. Have a motion from someone, please. Thank you. Abby, seconded by. Thanks, Tracy.
Oh, I second that, sorry.
That's good. Can we hear us okay?
No, I can hear everybody except Nobby, actually. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad, but it's,
Amalgamated with Gaunt and Chicago during that.
Motion's been made and is now put. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 2. Item 3, which is over on page 84 of your agenda, is the business plan for emergency management Southland.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The business plan has been created to meet the requirements of the joint services agreement. There's supposed to be a business plan created every year. So this is Emergency Management Southland's business plan for this upcoming year. Obviously, after coming the tail end of a pandemic, we need to concentrate on 2 areas. This was the consensus amongst the team. And that was looking at our current hazard awareness levels of preparedness and communication and capabilities, and increasing the capacity and capability of the council staff to assist in a response. There is a work plan that sits in behind this that goes into what we do month to month, and if anybody would like a copy of that, we can supply that. At a particular time, I tabled this at the KEG meeting and mistakenly didn't see that they wanted a work plan rather than a business plan, but this does meet with that requirement within the joint services agreement. One of the things that was brought up in the KEG area is I had put in a requirement for us to get up to a 50% awareness. And it was pointed out during the KEG chair that that may be an easy target as we have a 49% awareness. So we have changed that to a 60% awareness now to get us there. And again, it's about that changing people's awareness to preparedness. Happy to take any questions on the business.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Harris.
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? If not, the motion was, please say aye.
Right, very good plan.
So what page are we on next? 1 4.
Sorry, 99.
Here we go, 99, the 21-22 annual report, compiled by Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. As I'm reporting on this, I'm reminded the fact that we just come through a pandemic, and our welfare coordination group was heavily involved in assisting MSD with their side of responding to that pandemic. We had several regular stakeholder meetings, and I think, as you remember in the Mayoral Forum, we brought in a long-range forecaster, weather forecaster, just at the time of the drought, that I believe gave us an excellent briefing on what we were facing, and we propose to do the same thing again in the near future after the elections are sorted out, and that is to understand what we're facing coming up. So we also did a public service talk through our website where people could log in and listen to the long range forecaster. They talked through the fact that what makes a weather warning, what makes a weather watch, and they also went into some detail about the drought that we were facing at the time and the weather conditions, and how those drought conditions were possibly predictable. So that's why we're looking at getting a climatologist in very short order. And the fact that we assisted with the response. So I tabled the report, but and I thank the KEC chair for pointing out that the actual the expenditure financial performance report is incorrect, and I apologise for this. This should have been changed. The particular area of interest was the sorry, I've tabled the updated report, but it was brought out in the meeting that there was a line item of general expenses which has a $54,000 expenditure with a $2,000 budget, and I found out just recently in inquiry to that where that had gone, and we had got contract labour and actually miscoded it into that area. So I can only offer my apologies that this original report was in this particular annual report. It has been updated with the more recent report, and we will be changing those figures to better reflect the contract labour. One area that we did have was we had expenditure on a couple of repeaters that we weren't expecting that needed repairing. They're in that general expenses area, and we spent about $9,000 on rat tests to deal with, just in case we had a response during the pandemic. Our idea was to not exclude non-vaccinated people, but to get everybody to do a rat test prior to entry. So we bought enough rat tests to cover us for a couple of weeks for the number of people we thought we'd need. So again, let me just table my apologies for that incorrect report being in there. That was an error of mine.
Thank you, Simon. Do we have any questions or discussion on this report?
Look, I'm not sure whether it's the right time to ask this question, Mr. Chair, but it just, because this is relating to but in terms of the identification that Environment Southland have made recently about the potential failure that may occur around some of the flood banks, particularly on the Matara, but I think also on other rivers as well. Does that change anything that you're doing in terms of that risk assessment and how that's being handled?
So yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Environment Southland had a number of drop-in meetings in Gore, Mataura and Kingdom, and we attended those meetings to ensure that we could get our message of preparedness across. We also want to back that up with going back to the community groups and ensuring that we get the messaging out about stock banks, excuse me, and their current issues around them. We've got a plan to actually start putting out a magnetic plan. I don't know if you remember the shopping list plan that we had, but it's something that sits on your fridge. It's a magnet. It will be an A5 size, and it means that you can fill in your plan there, which comes in handy for parents of children if they've got babysitters coming around, because it's got a number of numbers on that. On top of that, we're working with the catchment management team at Environment Southland and attempting to develop a team of experts to look at how we can look at new trigger levels with the rivers so that we can provide some surety to our elected officials that it is a time to act, and possibly look at when we would be declaring a state of emergency. That's still got to go before the executive leadership team And we are assisting with the catchment management on their investigations of the stock banks, especially around the Gore, Matilda and Wyndham areas. We also know that they've got a lot of government funding to actually repair some of those stock banks, and I believe that work's going ahead in Wyndham at the moment as we speak. Sorry, Mayor Hicks, did that answer your question?
Not really. So that's good. It's good to get that information. But I guess really what I'm thinking about is we've had a series of statements that have come from Environment Southland saying that there is potential for greater hazard from flooding compared to what we've known in the past because the flood banks may well be weakened. And I understand that there's work about to begin or has begun on just working out exactly what the risks are. But from a civil defence perspective, how involved are we in that process so that we can get the correct message out to all the residents out there? Because it has caused quite a degree of anxiety, particularly in Mataura and Wyndham and those sort of places. So having I would just have to say that having a statement from Environment Southland, and I guess they're doing the best they can, having that statement come out and say, look, there's more risk, you've just got to be wary of this, has just served to frighten people as opposed to get them into a better state of preparedness. And we do need to be very careful about the messages we're giving.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand a lot of the reports were done on visual inspection of the particular area.
Right. So are we involved in actually making sure that we get accurate and urgent information as soon as possible on what the reality is as opposed to the speculation?
Yes, so we're not directly involved, but we are involved with the catchment management team. They are currently doing, I think, a study of the Matilda stock banks at the moment. So they've got an EMI machine in there, and they are currently seeing what the actual stock banks are made up of, so that they can give us some kind of idea of exactly engineeringly how well prepared they are. That information is needed to actually then look at trigger points that we can actually say, well, this is an area where we would be concerned. I believe at the moment, as a rule of thumb, they're talking about water levels 1 metre up the stock bank. And we just got the hydrology department to give us some kind of indication of exactly what QMEX that would be, so that we could then start tracking that back to a warning stage at the pyramid.
Yeah, I don't mean to be critical in any way, shape, or form. I know it's a challenging situation, but getting accurate information to residents has got to be the top priority.
Agreed.
Mayor Hicks, do you mean, when you say we, do you mean?
I guess all of us, Neil, both district councils, regional council, and civil defence, making sure that we've got a coherent and unified position on everything.
Yeah, and where they source that information on, because I've been asked and I've just been directing it to the team at ES.
Yeah, the issue for the people of Mataura, if I was living there, would be the trigger levels. The first thing I want to know is if we can have a trigger level at a lower level than it was on stock banks last time, what we had assumed they were capable of supporting. That needs to be really important.
Yeah.
So, Chair, I'm conscious that Mayor Hicks started his comments with, I'm not sure if this is the right place. And the item under discussion is the annual report for the last year. I wonder whether CDM would consider actually resolving that either the business plan or the hazards should be updated to recognise the risk that exists as a result of the advice from ES on the Matilda flood banks, and to ask that that be specifically identified within next year's work plan, and for us to report back to you separately on that linkage that has been talked about Gore, ES and civil defence being able to get those messagings correct and to make sure that we're working to get people not frightened but ready for any event that should happen. And I wonder whether we could do that in executive level and then report back to you. And if you were to pass a resolution in that way, that would be an instruction to us.
Thanks, Claire.
So Mayor Hicks, you support that?
No, absolutely.
So we have a resolution as Claire has outlined. Does that become the motion to Keeg?
Yes,
Happy
it
to
would.
second that.
Thank you. Seconded by Mayor Tom. Is there any further discussion on that? You've reported that. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
So thank you, Kathy, for raising that. Probably right, it was part of the next report probably, but it's relevant. And
It's very relevant.
currently
It's very,
relevant.
yeah.
Just on the issue of the annual report, we've had an updated presented today, which in effect shows that the independent contractors should have been probably up in the contract labour further up with the description. But there's also an issue for me that when you look at the budget column for 2021, 22, which is down the right hand side, and you look what's in the report here, it seems to me, and correct me if I've got this wrong, there's some major discrepancies in there over and above just the independent contractors. So if you look at the total income, for argument's sake, and the actuals and budgets on the one that you presented here, we've got 1.7 against 1.4. In this report that we got in here, it's 1.7, but only 500,000, 558. And so when you go down that column on the budget 2021, 22, a budget being nothing more than a forecast, there are major discrepancies all the way through the figures. Way out of kilter now. I'm not trying to tag you, I'm just suggesting that somebody's put the wrong figures because of over the end, you've got an expenditure of 1.339, which dovetails with that. But over on your updated one, you've got a 1.367 budget, and yet in here, you've only got $500,000. 5553. Like all down those columns, they've all increased. And I don't understand how a budget increases. I mean, I can understand how income increases as you go through the year, but you always start up with a budget. Any increases or decreases is what you put in your actuals, not in your actual budget. So I don't know what's going on with that column. I've not been here when that started. So
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, this was the statement I was provided with when I was making the report. Obviously, in re-looking at the statement, it just didn't make sense. There was a lot of errors in it, etc. Now, I can't speak to why that happened, but on return to Environment Southland Finance Department and asked for a correct one, they produced the tabled document that I put before you. And again, this should have been corrected, unfortunately, after the KEG meeting. And it wasn't, so I can only apologise for that. That is
I'm not looking for an apology. I'm just looking for someone along the line in orders is going to look at this.
Yeah. Look, I cannot speak to why that is so out of kilter. I really cannot. That was just provided at the time of writing the report.
So the paper that forms part of the minutes of this meeting is the one that's tabled.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. The recommendation is that we note the 21-22 annual report. I'll move from the chair that we do that. Thank you, Mayor Tom. Seconded by Mayor Tom. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that report.
So that acknowledges the change from
The table paper.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The hazard risk assessment report. I'm just a wee bit puzzled. this page is left intentionally blank, this page is left, what did we do there? It doesn't matter. Just a different.
I'm not sure if that's the Chair. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, the hazard risk assessment report is part of our hazardscape and makes up the starting of the review of the group plan. At the moment, the group plan is behind schedule, and I suppose the reason for that is we're waiting on developments within the trifecta program within the new law. That will change the new national response plan, and then we have to come into line with that response plan. So should we spend a lot of time going into a group plan, and then there be significant change in the trifecta area and then the national planning area, we will then have to redo our plan. So we'll be doing it twice. So we've intentionally held back, but the one thing that doesn't change is the hazard risk assessment report. This is done to the current NEMA director guideline standards, and we had TOA Consulting come in and assist us with this piece of work. There was a meeting where there were a couple of meetings, one with NEMA risk assessment team assisting us, and one with the TOA Consulting team assisting us. From this, the areas that were seen as major concerns were the animal disease, the alpine fault rupture, water supply failure, regional flooding, and tsunami, and that's the local source of Pusiga Trench. And they were identified as high and high level risks, very high, and high level risks. Something to do with the hazard risk assessment. It is very unusual to have any risk assessment happen within the extreme level because of the way the questions are asked. I just ask everybody just to look at this with a regional focus. This is not a local risk assessment, so it's for the Southland region. So for instance, if something happens in a small town like Athol, and it is quite devastating for that particular small town, regionally that may not affect it. So it may not show up as an extreme hazard in the regional sense. And that's what the group plan asks for. But it's what we are doing in the future is we're going around and discussing this locally so that we can understand the local areas of concern and high risk. On page 25 of this, or page 141 of the report, TOA Consulting had a number of recommendations which were put to the PEG as recommendations that we continue to follow. The area that we're working on at the moment is working in partnership with local iwi and having them do a risk assessment through the lens of an iwi Māori perspective, so that we can understand not only what is a valuable tonga, but also what culturally is significant for them in the area of a civil defence emergency. I'm happy to answer any questions on this report.
Yeah, did you have some commentary about drought that could be raised?
This is the place to raise it. I see that drought is raised as a medium and as a possible, but if CDM felt that it would like to see a greater focus on that, then in resolving what to do with the report, it could ask for more work to be done on that particular risk.
Given that the legislation is being developed at the moment to allow the declaration of an emergency at a lower level than currently is allowed for, drought could probably come.
Yeah, I think what was identified, Chair, was that there's drought and there's drought. Drought in northern Southland can be expected and is budgeted for or planned for by the farmers and the people that live in those areas. But drought on coastal areas is totally new. And that's where the main issues were. Sure, there was an issue on Kakapo Road with an aquifer, but the rest of the district up in northern was okay, if I can use that word. But areas such as Tuatapere around Colac Bay right through the Catlins wasn't, and including Otatara, where they relied on rainwater. So, you know, there's drought and there's drought, if that's a fair enough summary.
So, Mr. Chair, the point that Mayor Tom is making actually plays well to Simon's advice that the hazard should be considered from a regional perspective.
Yes.
And perhaps CDM would like to note the desire to consider a drought that has a regional impact as being a risk that they would like to see have a higher level of recognition. Just in the sense that I don't think it's common, but it could be, I don't think I want to use the word catastrophic, but it could have severe consequences if not given appropriate thought to. Now, we know that ES have been asked to give appropriate thought to it, but bringing it back and having it included in CDM would be useful.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. That's a fair summary, because that's where it was getting to. Like, this was, you know, we got people waiting for 2 to 3 weeks for a water tanker. It was regional.
Yeah.
I would have said too that where it affects a city with a population of 50,000, that's actually is a regional effect as well. We were approaching a point where water restrictions were going to have to be applied to the city, weren't we?
We were approaching a point that in itself is interesting, because many cities have water restrictions almost every year. It's just that Southland is unaccustomed to that. Other asked ES to do, and this was a discussion at the mayoral forum, I think, might have come out of KEG in the first place, but was around whether some of our arrangements play against us at the time of drought. For instance, the limitation on how many hours a day you can take water from the water tower and Invercargill to provide tankers out to places. But certainly the point Mayor Tom makes is absolutely right, that when it is across the region, it has a severe consequence. It's much more than whether or not we can grow our lawns the way we want, or whether we can use water the way we're accustomed to using it, but actually have we got enough for stock, and have we got enough to sustain life? So it's worth including in there, but perhaps making it a stronger view in that particular instance, because the statement drought has a preconceived notion for many of us, and Mayor Tom's making the point, regional.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that. I think to the Environment Southland, and I have had a discussion with the chairman about this, that Environment Southland needs to have a plan to prepare for the next drought, particularly a communications plan, so that people are prepared, are ready, and have the knowledge to minimise the effects of their water use. But we need to develop that in advance, not wait for it to happen first.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm assisting with that process.
Thank you.
So just in regards to this risk register, and I don't want to put it on you, Claire, as the only chief executive there, but I just wonder whether the NTU, National Transition Unit, is aware that this will be their baby in 1 July 24.
Oh, Mayor Tom, I couldn't possibly comment on the NTU recognises it's going to get on 1 July 20.
Well, they're going to get the whole lot, that's for sure.
They are, but come back to my point. We will remain responsible for planning,
Yep.
and we will remain responsible for civil defence. And I think civil defence and ES needs to work in hand in hand on this one.
I just wonder when we bring the NTU into it, that was really where I was coming from.
Yeah. Later. I don't think they've got the horsepower for it at the moment.
Okay. But I guess they're aware of it.
One day.
So, yeah, when the drought was developing, we had the meteorology people telling us we had a meteorological drought rather than a real drought, you know, which we would recognise. So do we all understand the differences there, and should we get them to use better, more acceptable language to describe the situation that we're likely to be in?
I think if we get that that young lady that did the presentation to speak to Nima at some stage, they might be in a better position to understand it, because that was brilliant. I don't know what it cost, and I don't really care, because that really summed it up for everybody. That was a brilliant presentation.
Yes.
Right, so we're on the hazard risk assessment paper. Do we have any further questions or commentary around that? Very comprehensive report.
Mr. Chair, there is a lot of information in it, and the comment that Simon has made is that it's Toad's report rather than his own, but it does remain important for the preparation of the group plan.
Yes.
So maybe your recommendation could be amended, could have an addition that the group feels that the importance of regional drought, or that drought be considered as regional drought, and that this be given greater profile to as well, something that just adds to the motion.
With that, it just says we note the report at the moment, but we recommend that more weight be given to your better words for me.
The hazard of a drought across the Southland region.
You capture that? Do we understand what the motion is? I'll put that motion from the chair, that we note the report, and with that added codicil that we pay more attention to drought.
Happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Tom. Unless there's any further discussion, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, just for clarification there, you want EMS to do a deeper dive on the drought
Yes.
and drought circumstances for the region. Is that correct?
What you heard, Simon, is that CDEM has already asked EMS to do further work on the drought and drought across the region, but they want to ensure that it's given appropriate profile in the group plan.
Okay.
I think you're hearing that preparedness is the real issue. Might also be worth picking up Mayor Tom's point that there be a footnote or a recognition in the introduction to the group plan of the proposed changes to the delivery of free waters and the importance of working with the proposed entity for the delivery of water services.
Yeah, no, I think if we note that now, Claire, that's a great idea. It just shows we haven't actually missed them in our minds.
And it will remind us in 6 months' time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Have you recorded that, Andrew?
No, I've got it on tape.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But my impression was, whether it be right or wrong, that we were caught a bit by surprise from the drought last year. And we were only responding without having planned for that response. That was my feeling as we went along through that. It was just happening. It was like a slow landslip that was just gradually building up. We're all praying for rain, but it didn't happen. So I hope we're better prepared this time around. It's not just in your desk, it's on Environment Southland's desk.
So we're certainly working with Environment Southland to be so that they are a lot more prepared.
If I'm there, you will have my support.
It was a case, and I don't want to relitigate it, but it was a case of the computer saying no.
Yes.
But I think the other thing I mentioned before was that we got lulled into, once we got rain, that we were actually okay, but we're not okay. The scientist that gave that presentation was quite clear that we've got a 5 to 8 year recovery period. So even if we have a normal season this coming year, we still have ongoing problems sitting in the aquifers.
But we have more knowledge now, and we've got hindsight.
Yeah. So hence the deep dive is quite a helpful thing to look beyond just the surface water.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, item 6 on the agenda is the Alpine Fault Magnitude 8 report, the AF8 report, which is still
56.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The AF8 Year 6 report just highlights the areas that AF8 have been working to, again, change that awareness to preparedness. There has been a decision to have a more strategic focus now that the program manager is a permanent employee. We can look beyond just the year-to-year building up of this. So in this particular report, we asked for an AF8 strategy document to cover us through those 3 years. And as I'm sure you can see in the annual report, the areas that they concentrated on, including the difficulty they had through the pandemic, where they, instead of having a roadshow, went to a YouTube presentation. They are updating their website currently, and they're also looking at a common operating picture. So as the year draws to a close, or as it drew to a close, they then came up with a program strategy, which is on page 169 of this particular report. And that program strategy has the 3 focus areas. And it clearly spells out the partner roles and critical contributions to the AF8 program, including the combination of not only the South Island groups, the South Island emergency management groups, our science partners, and NEMA. And those focus areas that the AF8 will be working on is raising awareness, coordinating intelligence, and networking and collaborating. Already there are a number of lifelines that are on board with the AF8, and currently, as we speak, there's a Lifelines conference happening in Queenstown, where the AF8 program manager will be speaking to those areas. The idea towards the end of this financial year is that we'll have a GIS platform with a common operating picture upon that GIS platform, where we can note most of the hazards, most of the fragilities, and where we can start working on updating the safer framework. I'm happy to answer any questions on this particular report.
A lot of development work, as they having appointed a full-time program manager, is certainly a positive step forward. I just note that, you know, the probability level of that quake has been upgraded from 30% one to 68 or 70%.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think it's 70%.
70% going by the science behind the studies that are going on. So it's much more an immediate threat now than we thought it might have been. Do we have any commentary or questions about the AF8 program, this report?
Just a hell of a lot of work in it, and thank you to everyone that's been involved in this right from day one, really. It's been tremendous effort.
Also through you, Mr. Chair, there's been the successful employment of 2 employees on this particular program through the extra NEMA funding that has been provided to the program. And we have a a communication and engagement officer as a 0.5 FTE, and an insight and intel person who will be a full-time FTE assisting this program and assisting developing, not only communicating the message, but actually making that common operating picture for the entire South Island.
So those staff, will they be based here at Southland?
No, they, as the Alpine Fault is a whole of South Island issue, they'll be working remotely. One is going to be working remotely from Canterbury, and one will be working remotely from Auckland. The comms and engagement person will be in Auckland, and the insights and intel person will be in Canterbury.
Okay. Another positive step forward, and good to have that funding coming in to allow us to do that sort of work. All right, is there any further discussion about the AF8 Item 6 report. Not, do we have somebody who would move the recommendation?
Happy to move that recommendation, Chair.
Moves on, seconded by.
Happy to do that.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
No one's against. Carried, thank you for your input. We're to item 7, the National Emergency Management Agency update. Rochelle, you are.
Yeah, I can speak to this. I will take it as read. However, I will just speak to a couple of points within it. So starting with the trifecta program. So that is still tracking and the written submissions to the select committee are likely to be called for in late November this year. So again, going back to earlier comments around it being post local body elections with hearings in early 2023. And there is work underway on the national plan and guide, which gives effect to the bill. So that engagement is happening, and it's all moving. You know, some of the smaller timeframes continue to shift and change, but the bigger stuff we're still tracking ahead, and we'll continue to update that and keep you all informed. Our monitoring, alerting and reporting centre has opened. It went live on the 27th of June, and that's a 24/7 awake capability. So that's stepped in to take over from NEMA's duty team. So there was a 24/7 duty team that was generally NEMA staff who stepped into duty. So the intention is to have this, we're calling it the MAR. So if you hear anyone talk about the MAR operating 24/7 and still going through a bit of a transition phase. It's been quite a lot to set up, and there is actually a lot to learn when you're looking at New Zealand's hazardscapes and understanding emergency management and just all the players. So we still have a significant amount of NEMA staff working on duty parallel to the MAR, but it is going well and it's pretty exciting. Also just move along and to acknowledge the new Minister for Emergency Management, which I think most of you will have met by now. I know he's been around the country in his local government role. And so, yeah, we're really enjoying having him on board and in the role, and do hope at some stage he will get back down again to connect with an emergency management lens. And just lastly, the Local Government Power to Act during local government elections. So just drawing your attention to that, if there is a disaster immediately after the elections, that it is the Minister for Emergency Management who can declare between that time of being sworn in officially, unless you fast track. But what we do as advisors, just get in touch, obviously, with Simon to talk with myself or one of the other regional emergency management advisors to ensure that that process is followed correctly. But yeah, as of the election and when the new elected members are announced, it's not till you're re-elected or gone through that sworn-in process. Yeah. So there's a bit of a stand-down period. Yeah. So just be mindful of that, all those elected members. Yeah. And I think that's it from me. Actually, foot and mouth disease. And I think we've put that in there. Early conversations are happening around that and just raising that awareness, given that it has been found in Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries. You will all be very aware that that could have a very significant impact to New Zealand, especially our rural communities, which you are very, very largely a part of down here. So Simon also alluded to, there is a conversation happening with group managers later this week, just to keep the conversation alive. And also understand what NEMA's role is in this space, given that it is an MPI, or Ministry of Primary Industries led event, should it unfold. Yeah. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask a question around that foot and mouth as to what preparedness is occurring, especially with the MPI, because normally it's ambulance at the bottom of the cliff stuff, but we're aware that this is in the world and there's a possibility that it could come over the border. So it would be great to have people ready, to use one of the 4 R's, to respond, because we don't want to be running around with like chooks with their heads cut off on the day that foot and mouth is identified in New Zealand. And it is a very, will have a big impact on New Zealand as a whole. So it needs to be an all of government response. People shouldn't be arguing when it does get to, well, hopefully it doesn't possibly get across the border, but we know that velvet leaf and things like that were never thought to have got across the border either, but they did.
Yeah, through the chair, and just to respond to that, I am aware that there are a number of all of government conversations happening, and there is work happening in this space. I've been privy to a couple of meetings, not overly involved yet. I am aware that even at our borders currently, so in the airports, that communications and engagement campaigns are starting to happen, that we're starting to see a lot more visual there. However, there might be opportunity to get an update from MPI at some stage and feed that back through to ensure that you know actually what's happening. Yeah, I don't want to say what is happening if it's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But as long as Simon and his team know what is going on, I don't know if there's any discussions occurring between Anne and is it Anne Sutton and those ones that are involved in this. But anyway, we've got to be aware of it, that it can happen. We've had Ian Bovis here. There's still arguments over how that got here, but probably through human error.
So if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, I know Craig is working very closely with our local MPI people on this. And we're also working closely with the ES biosecurity team. They've been approached by MPI just to look at their capabilities and capacity should we have a foot and mouth outbreak at that particular time. So work is going on behind the scenes, but yeah, probably not as fast as we would like, but it is still going.
No, that's cool. I remember the one in, was it back in the 80s or late 70s, where everyone dressed in white for about 3 months and things were getting killed all over the shop. Not as old as Tracy, but I do remember that far back.
There was a Timaru supposed outbreak, wasn't it?
What was it? Yeah, you would have been involved in that too, Neville.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that report, Michelle. Thank you for attending our meeting and bringing us up to date and listening to what we're doing down here. The recommendation is that we note the report, or we receive the report. Receive the report. Do I have a mover for that, please?
Very happy to move that, and thank you. That was a very good report.
Right, moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Mayor Tom. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. Item 8 is the next meeting. Well, that's interesting, of course, because it's going to Simon and Claire to manage the next meeting, depending on who is sitting at the table. The elections will show us where we go. So it would be nice if it was the same team. I think we've worked very well together and got a good, viable organisation running.
Sure.
The recommendation is we have a meeting in approximately 6 months' time, and be up to the manager to notify us of that. I'll move that from the chair. Seconded by.
Happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Hicks, thank you.
If I may, just before the meeting ends, I'd just like to just say I've been a player now in CDM for a year and a bit, I believe. And in that time, I've seen the insides of working as an elected official. And I'd just like to thank you all for doing that job. I don't know how much rewards you get for it. I'm sure they're plenty, but I'm sure you get brickbat as well. Just to say thank you very much for the cooperation and the information and the guidance I've received from you all. And I hope to see you all at the next joint committee meeting.
No, I appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure. I don't know what the 8th of October is going to bring. I'd say Tracy will bloody cream it, but yeah,
it's nights at the moment, Gary.
Yeah, I certainly can't predict this one. But sorry, I thought we were going to do a bit of general business. I just wonder if we could have a quick chat around the regional leadership group, if that's an appropriate time to bring that up. We've got until tomorrow to put something together, and I got a reminder day before yesterday, and I thought I might just discuss it here this morning. My view is that we keep it going. I just don't know how to do that, but I will be answering the questions that have come out. Tracy, I meant to ring you yesterday. I'm sorry, but time got away on me.
That's all right. And to be fair, I haven't turned my mind to that either.
Yeah, but I am answering it this morning saying that my recommendation would be that we keep it going. It's been a great concept, and it's a way to share information, and obviously things like foot and mouth, if they were to come here, then that's the appropriate forum in my view.
Yeah, like, I'm total agreement. We do need to keep it going. Just what the form and frequency and all that sort of stuff is.
Yeah, Simon, I don't know if have you been asked to respond to that?
No, not really. It was like, I found it extremely valuable through COVID, and I think the information that we could get from all the other the government departments on where things are happening and what isn't happening was extremely valuable. Look, I see that as being. I think I see it as an extremely valuable group to get together, and it would be a real shame to actually lose those connections. Not although I think we do connect with them, but individually rather than as a group. So I think the regional leadership group is a really good process. I do remember Hugh Lloyd calling an urgent one just when we had that second spike of COVID. And that was just basically an awareness thing. And I wonder if after the meeting I have with Nima, sometime after that about the foot and mouth, maybe if I called a regional leadership group or I asked MSD to call it, I guess it's theirs now, to call a meeting just to discuss preparedness and information around foot and mouth, as it will be devastating, I guess, for the Southland region.
MSD or MPI? MPI, you mean?
No, I think we started, I remember starting the regional leadership group, but I think MSD has taken over the regional leadership group running. But we certainly would be looking at Rural Support Trust and MPI as being major players in that particular arena.
Yeah, I just found that having the leaders of each of these organisations, or close to being the leaders, having that direct information was absolutely paramount to getting through COVID. And I think that's going to be the same just with normal day-to-day type stuff, even issues that occur in our communities that we get together as required, or once every quarter or something like that. I don't know. But communication is key. We all get criticised for not communicating enough. And if we're not talking at the top level, then who's talking at the bottom level?
Yeah, and just one of the risks that we have is that we get, running up to probably the last year anyway, we probably had 3 or maybe even 4 regional groupings of individuals and representatives of organisations meeting together. And I think any recommendation I'll be making would be that we have one. And just who drives that, whether MSD is the right organisation to drive that. I think it's good that certain government departments have got to be part of it and have got to buy into it. But I'm just not sure they're the right driver of it. But yeah. I could be convinced on that too.
Yeah, and it's all going to come down to trust. Like if we're going to share our toys, then anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a useful working relationship with a number of agencies across Otago and Southland. I think it's been a valuable exercise, and be ashamed to let it go now that it's been created and improved.
Yeah, what I'm hearing through the grapevine is that no one wants it to fold, but as Tracy said, who's going to lead it? How's it going to go going forward?
So I must have a quick chat with Steph and just see what her thoughts are on it as well.
Yeah, I'll be answering it in about 10 minutes time. But no, just something to think about. But thank you for that.
Okay.
And thanks, Rochelle. And I don't know what's coming nationally over regional leadership groups, but it's certainly been a big plus down here because we all get on very, very well.
So Gary, yeah, we're a supporter as well. I've had some discussion with Steph about this. And one of the major benefits is the group actually pulled together both state players and NGOs as well.
Yes.
Often the NGOs are not there, or they have very restricted funding lines, which MSD can actually help with at times of crisis. And so she was quite taken back. I did some work with her when she first came into the role. to say, look, there's a whole lot of NGA groups sitting in Invercargill, as an example, that can be helping what you loosely call at-risk families. And she thought there would be half a dozen or a dozen. Well, there's actually more than 80. But we don't know where these people are.
Mm.
When we need them, it's too bloody late to get them in. So I still think that MSD has a role to play. I think they're the best positioned to actually run the group. But we've got to be strong to make sure that they don't unduly influence the nature of that group. And I heard you raise the issue about your community connectors and how they were going to be centralised back by MSD, and that was a terrible move. And I don't think you got to with that. But as a group, we have collectively we have some influence over that sort of development coming, and be able to say to MSD, hey, it's not right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And still having them call the shots, because they've got the grunt, I guess, to run the group, but making sure that our voices don't let them take us on a path that's not good for us. How did you get on with those community connectors at the end?
Still pulling my hair out over that one.
Michelle, could you just, do the regional leadership groups operate effectively right across New Zealand, or is it just something we've got down here?
They operate across New Zealand. I am only involved because I look at in the focal remit for Canterbury, Otago, Southland, and the Chatham Islands, and across all of those areas, they're working really, really effectively. And like you're talking about down here, the Chatham Islands one is continuing to meet right through. But yeah, like Simon said, it has been coordinated out of the Ministry of Social Development, I think, Public Service Commissioners. So it just depends in each group. But it sounds like it's been a great forum to bring all the players together.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It was originally coordinated by the CDM group, so Emergency Management South, and we kind of got it kicked off. And thanks to Mayor Tracy for chairing that. And I think as time went on, so we developed a bigger and bigger set of players that actually came along, and we got a much better picture of just exactly what's going on. I think, as I say, I'm happy to coordinate if the Joint Committee want me to. Regional Leadership Group discussion on foot and mouth and its impacts. It'll just take me a wee bit of time to get a couple of experts together to actually talk to it, and also probably after the NEMA discussions we're going to have.
But I think the group, the leadership group, needs to be more than just the foot and mouth. I mean, it can basically cover every sort of.
It's an everything group. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people will play a role in that group or not play a role depending on what issue we're dealing with.
I agree. Yeah.
So Gary, just for your information, because we don't have an item on the agenda, the public meeting agenda, that we're having general business, this hasn't actually been recorded as part of the business of the meeting.
No, that's fine. It was just a discussion point.
Yeah, that's fine. No, we're happy to have the discussion. It's just it wasn't signalled in the notice of the public meeting.
No, I'll get that. Sorry. And it reminded me when that email came in day before yesterday that I need to chat about it this morning. So my apologies, Mr. Chair.
That's fine. It's a good discussion, and I'm sure you will put your input in on behalf of all of us appropriately.
Yep. On the Southland District anyway. So no, that's cool. I better go. Yes, once again, Simon and your team, thank you, and Neville, and I'm holding you up from your lunch shout, Simon.
So you've got a healthy budget at the moment.
Thank you. No, thank you for your time and your input.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.